Hey, there we go. Welcome to episode 130, I think, and a special edition of our. We've done a bunch of Quarkus 3 stuff coming out, and we saw Sebastian was already doing some Quarkus 3 and said, hey, you want to come on and talk about all the horrors about the real world uses of Quarkus and have a conversation about that. And then, yeah, we have Dimitri's executive engineering manager for most of the Quarkus team in Red Hat. And yeah, here to yeah, talk shop basically. Um, and Sebastian, you were here. I tried to find the episode, but for some reason I can't. But I know you were here in the past. But I think that was like in the early Quarkus 2 or maybe even late Quarkus 1 days.
Hmm.
Um,
Has been a while ago, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll let you introduce yourself and maybe who are you and what do you do with Quarkus, and we can take it from there.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Sebastian Daschner. I do a lot of Java stuff, basically. So I always say I do enterprise Java in all sorts of forms. My background is, the Java EE, J2EE, Jakarta EE, microprofile, this sort of sphere. But in general, I do pretty much anything that a modern enterprise project needs. So also a lot of testing stuff, automation, DevOps, all of basically the whole range. But anything really like real world. So anything that is really required in projects. And I support my clients and customers and all sorts of things. I do consulting. I do training, mostly nowadays on Quarkus and or on cloud native stuff and some other topics there. I'm also a big fan of developer productivity, and I think that is something we can talk about today a lot. And just in general, I can share a little bit my point of view and my experience of using Quarkus now for pretty much 4 years, and definitely for almost 4 years in production projects. So I think that's interesting.
Sebastian, we haven't met in person since J Crit, I think, four
I
years
think so.
ago.
Yeah, it has been a while.
And since then, you've been independent, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yes. So I used to work for IBM as a developer advocate. So I did this like full-time job for talking at conferences and creating content. And now it's more like a hobby thing again. So just to put out content that's hopefully helpful for for developers who do enterprise Java stuff. And yeah, so a lot of Quarkus content if people want to follow that on Twitter and YouTube and my channels. So that's that.
excellent, excellent.
And yeah, and I think you when you were on here, I think you were just before or after you changed jobs to around the yeah
Mhm.
the IBM stuff. So cool. And I remember, yeah, I think you the one you did the thing where you use Quarkus Dev Mode for non-Quarkus projects or something.
Yes,
That
that's
was
also one of the fun things. Yes, and actually one of my favorite Quarkus, I would say, killer features where it really shines. It's basically the development mode, the effective way to run tests, and I think it makes sense. But yeah, we can we can talk about that.
definitely. Well, let's jump into it. And if you want to share
Mhm.
your screen or show the thing.
Well, yes. I mean, I don't have too much to share, so I don't have any slides or something. But I would say, as my experience, the real world experience with Quarkus, I don't want to. The biggest topic is developer experience and the whole productivity that you get, mainly with the dev mode and how well this works. But I think this is a longer topic that we can talk about and some potential, things that potential improvements. So maybe start with the other things is, well, what is my experience with Quarkus? I would say it works extremely well, especially given that it is still, for the enterprise space where I come from, quite young. So this was always a little bit surprising to me that, especially I'm from Germany, and German companies in particular tend to be very conservative and not that fast moving. And pretty much all of my clients have had at least a look into Quarkus and saying, okay, we're going to look into it, we evaluate it, or we are already adapting it or having some sort of POC. Which I found quite surprising, because, well, enterprise companies, right? So this is kind of interesting. And just for projects who use it, it always works, very well. Like even, I have to say surprisingly well. Like the first time I tried it in like early 2019, It was just out there, has just been released, sort of as the first, public release. And I already saw it was more than just a toy. It was not just a proof of concept or it kind of works, but it was really you could build real stuff with it. And that's the case for all of its components, really. So for, of course, the stuff that has been around for a while with all the typical, JAX-RS CDI thingies, but also like Panache and Qt and the more Quarkus-specific extensions. So that's pretty cool. And actually, I'm very, very happy with the state of the project. And I mean, I have been even before Quarkus 2, I would say. Well, with Quarkus 2, the development experience still improved a lot. But I would say, from my perspective, really, it's not even necessary that at least for me, I don't even care that much about the latest like features with container or Kubernetes integration and all of these extra extensions, because quite frankly, almost all of my enterprise projects use Quarkus in the JVM mode, so no native builds, but just like JVM. Very often, even not the OpenJDK, but the sort of JVM of choice that is there in enterprise projects, which is what I always try to emphasize, because sometimes Quarkus is advertised a little bit as you have to go native or you have to use OpenJDK, where I say, okay, first of all, it's just another JVM application. You can use a JVM of choice, of course, and then just with a very basic enterprise Java build is to say, okay, you build a container, you have your own Docker file. Of course, you can use some more fancy integration in your Maven build tooling and all of this, and especially once you move to Kubernetes. But all of my projects really don't use this, for the integration. That we say, okay, all of more and more stuff is being added to Quarkus, but I would even say, don't even overdo it, sort of, with the features there, because I'm very happy what basically happens inside the application, like anything that's really regarding the application, and anything else is just use whatever you like from the ecosystem around it. That's usually not a big deal for the Java application, at least. And yeah, I'm very happy with that.
Good to hear.
Can I ask something? Initially people were coming to Quarkus for performance. They heard, it's small, it's fast, etc. But then they stay for the rest of the stuff, like developer experience or the slick features, APIs. Do you see any change in the market regarding that, like the mindset, like people looking more into DevX, and see, this works great out of the box.
Yeah.
It's slick.
Yes.
What do you see?
Yes, actually a lot. And the funny thing is both. It depends whom you talk to. So especially from my perspective, if I say, well, I like Quarkus, I want to find a good solution for my clients, and just I'm not sponsored by anybody, but I just want to find the best solution for them out there. And when I both talk to more management, and or IT decision makers, and for developers, you both find very interesting points. First of all, for the resource consumption and actually the cost saving, because especially memory consumption equals just to dollars being saved in the cloud age. So if you can run the same stuff just with less, it will be cheaper. And then of course, as a decision maker, you care about that, and you say, okay, I can just compare the numbers, and then it's an easy decision. But also for the developers, and that's kind of cool, because sometimes you have the case, okay, we have to use it because it's cheaper, and all of the developers are like, yeah, but that's not a cool technology, or we don't really like this. Or the other way around, where you say, hey, that's a cool stuff, but who's going to pay for it? But you can kind of see this direction in both areas. That really depends on who you talk to. It really makes sense to say, okay, we're gonna have a look at Quarkus for the next enterprise project or so in the companies. Mm-hmm. And when you talk to developers, just all of them are really delighted with the development experience and how well it works, especially how seamless it works and how well it works. Because pretty much all of the modern enterprise frameworks have some sort of tooling around that you can say, hey, development mode, hot reload, and things like that. But mostly it is always kind of added, upon of it, or as a workaround or something, or you have to use some IDE tooling. And in Quarkus, it just works so well, regardless of what you change. Configuration, POM XML will just do its work because it has been built in from the beginning, which is really great for a developer and experience. So that's a very nice
Yeah,
thing.
it's one of the things when I joined. I wasn't here the first couple of months of Quarkus, and I saw what I was doing, and I was like, because I've done a lot of developer tooling, right? And I was like, when I saw it, I felt like, wait, this is gonna be like you're locking into the framework and stuff, and that is true in some sense. But I realized, oh wow, like you don't have to do anything to get started. And this was actually I did the developer studio and tooling for DevOps in I don't know for 10 years. And now I realized after 10 years, like the biggest issue we had was we had I don't know, let's say we had X amount of like let's say just big numbers, a million DevOps users out there, or 10 million, whatever it is. A fraction or fraction actually use the tooling to get those benefits of incremental updates and stuff that we could do. And with Quarkus, you don't have to have the latest IDE to get the real like the big wins.
Yeah.
There's still an IDE tooling for like content assist and other stuff that an IDE is really good to, but the basic stuff like hot reload and the testing is just there. And
You could use VI, yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, but basically, right? And this is the thing that people don't like. You have this. It's always also a fun battle, right? Because it's always like, oh, we should add that new feature to the IDE, or we go like, well, then we have to talk to IntelliJ. We have to talk to the Eclipse. We have to like, if we can find a way to put it into the tooling, sorry, into the runtime tooling or the dev mode tooling, everyone gets it. And on the other hand, if we add too many features to the dev mode, it also becomes a bit too bloated and hard to find. So it's a fun little dance. But I feel like in Quarkus has done this like nice approach that just makes it so we can get like best of both worlds basically, which I think is fairly unique. I don't think I've seen other runtimes do like in any whether it's Java or Python or Go. I haven't seen any similar thing. Um, and yeah, and still the last one is coming up is that we have some challenges with like with Gradle dev, like when you do dev with Gradle, especially in Kotlin, there's some stuff that we haven't handled well, which we will look into how to do. But people are like, oh, why don't we just use Gradle dev? Gradle has this thing called continuous build or continuous test or something.
I think continuous build, yeah.
Yeah, which basically is Gradle's, and it's a great feature because it works for anything, but it has this thing that it doesn't know what the framework is doing. So you have the problem; it always reloads on any change on disk.
Yeah.
Where Quarkus goes, well, I'm not going to spend my energy on doing anything unless a request comes in, and that means your machine is doing less, and you don't have sudden changes until you actually do something. And that's a small detail, but I think it's the big difference that makes it, oh, that's why it's worth Quarkus to have this, let's say special dev mode. Yeah.
That's
sorry.
definitely something. Yeah, so basically from a broader perspective, well, I'm really happy with the state of the project, and I also don't have like big improvements where I say, okay, you need this, something like something is a showstopper for me. Like not at all. Actually, I'm very happy how it works. And I would be especially happy if just the core at least and the core extensions stay as lean as they are. That it's really fast to just start up your default enterprise project that with everything that it needs. So you don't want to get too bloated just because you can, but to say, oh, let's generate some containers and Kubernetes and whatnot. I mean, at least that's my view on it, to be just like very straightforward. And this works really well. So yes,
just a comment on that one. So that is the same philosophy we actually have, is that all the core stuff, or not core, but like we want to keep the fundamental stuff small and efficient. And if you do Kubernetes, it's only when you actually start doing something that you have to pay the price, whether that is Kubernetes deployments or I don't know, some workflow setup kind of thing. Then you add an extension that then do more for you. So
if you want,
yeah, that's again a balance to find, but yeah, it's definitely part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. So yes, this comment that we just read, Quarkus is a great resource to get an overview over the enterprise Java ecosystem. Yes, I fully agree. And not just to get an overview, but also to try it out quickly, because thanks to the development mode, if you say, hey, I want to test a CDI feature or whatever, I think that's definitely fair to say.
Sebastian, you were a big advocate of standards, APIs, Java EE, Jakarta, microprofile. You still see a lot of traction among customers?
I still am.
Yeah.
Yes. Now you especially see this when people want to migrate projects and or just change the way how they do things to Quarkus. Because if you have existing code, for most of the code, that's actually very straightforward. Yes, of course, EJB is not supported, and you might have some corner cases things for more complex setups. But really, for at least 90%, and I've been involved in quite a few migration projects, it is very straightforward to take existing code and migrate it to a Quarkus project. Of course, you cannot run it out of the box. You have to do some work with the configuration and how to run it. But for most of the code that you have, like the actual code where all of your investment is in the business logic, that is usually straightforward, especially if you use CDI, application scope bean, things like that. If you use JPA, definitely this works. You just copy and paste this, which is very nice.
Do you have any empirical data, like for typical projects? How much time does it take to rewrite it to Quarkus?
Any data? Well, the fastest were literally just a few hours. When you say, okay, you have pretty much the standards being used, you don't need to change much, so you literally change the runtime, maybe configuration to the easier part, and that's that. And then it just depends how much, starting from there, it gets the more complex stuff or non-supported stuff like EJBs or so you used. And then, of course, that's that. But this also would be involved for a more migration, like migrating to the latest Jakarta EE version or so project, right? So if you say you want to get rid of old APIs, then that's that. But like from my experience, it works surprisingly well, like this.
Yeah, and we had cases where someone migrated not even from Java EE, but from, let's say, Spring Boot, like typical app, and it took them like 2 days. And people are surprised. The thing is, don't believe it, but for standard stuff, this is more or less what it takes.
This is really true. And especially with the programming model also, right? Because this is so similar in Spring Boot. And yes, Quarkus partly supports the Spring annotations, but even if you would change it, it's usually not a big deal because the concepts are the same. If you have a singleton being here, if you have an application scope there, usually straightforward. JPA is the same, REST controllers are very similar. So that's definitely true.
We actually have a few questions that I don't want to leave on hang here with it. There's Milad says core performance is good, but when it comes compared with Golang, it would not be selected.
Yeah, I disagree. I heavily disagree. So this and I can give a very good example. Finance industry. Okay. If you take high frequency trading, people who have a lot of money, they all use Java solutions. And for me, that's the killer argument, because if there would be something better out there, they would lose their money. And if you have unlimited money, basically you can take the best solution out there. On a more serious note, Quarkus not Quarkus, JVM. A JVM-based solution can be one of the fastest performing runtimes. And why? Because of the hotspot and just-in-time compilation. The running software will adapt itself on the actual execution invocation profile. So what really is invoked in your application, depending on your architecture, with really the optimizations that you need. So you don't have to, the compiler doesn't have to choose this up front, with the loop unrolling and inlining and all of these things. You can actually optimize it on the thing that is being invoked. And you can look this up online somewhere with some comparisons. So if you actually take the throughput rate of a similar application, just regardless of Quarkus, but just the JVM land, and compare it with some other natively compiled languages, then Java will perform better.
Yeah, This is the thing is, this is always depending on your use case, right? If what you want to do is have a cross-compiled, very quickly, a little utility that runs on all platforms, and performance in multi-threaded environments aren't the biggest thing, yeah, Golang is a good choice. But if you have an existing library or application, or as you said, like really want can utilize the multiple threads and stuff, then Java is a good one. And yeah, like throughput and performance, like a proper architected Java is as well as a proper architected Go, as far as I
Or better.
right. So yeah, it depends on the
Mhm.
context. So if you can give examples, that'll be awesome. We will follow up on that. And then he said, one here is I know is a very practical issue. It's like, how to make compatible existing company infra, like how we should integrate with Datadog in DVM mode or crawl VM. So
Yes. Yeah, please go ahead.
go ahead, you first.
Yes, so this is a very important point. How to integrate it, and this is a question. Okay, what do you have right there in your landscape as of today? And I see this a lot in big companies when they say, "Hey, we or the DevOps team or the ops team or the admins or whoever, we know how to handle a JVM. We know our runtime. We know how to integrate it with all the existing tooling." And this is a very valid argument, is to say, okay, all the new applications. I mean, there's a reason why a lot of companies have these blueprints and guidelines, what to use, what to integrate. So it's not just it's not obvious. Like for us developers, it's like, okay, take my container and run it. Yes, but how? And it needs to integrate in this whole landscapes. And there's a much more questions to be answered. And that is one of the reasons why actually pretty much all of my client projects use the JVM mode, because they typically have a JVM of choice that is integrated in all of these things. They know how to take a thread dump, a heap dump, and how to debug. And then this runs your Quarkus application. So with GraalVM or with any other, actually even just if you change to JVM, then it's already a question. And of course, if you change sort of the architecture to a native executable, then that's a different story. Of course, all of that works as well. It's just a new question. You have to sort of integrate this anew. You have to answer these questions again in terms of how to solve all of these points.
Yeah, and
which is the thing to consider.
I keep saying that Quarkus at its core is a framework to optimize Java application. That's what it does, right?
Yeah.
And then you can do the extra steps for the native builds. But people seem to miss that point, or maybe
Yeah, which is why I'm trying to be quite active about it. That you say, hey, like you say, we can run Quarkus just as a Java application, and you run this very well, in this regard. So, and the Quarkus build time optimization always gives you a benefit. So that's a cool thing. You always benefit from it. And if you compare these two JVM applications, the Quarkus one will perform better because you do the optimization up front and remove what is not necessary. So, yeah.
Other questions there, Max?
No, I think that's that for now. So I think we touched on this important point already, like JVM versus native mode. And yeah, as we said before, this always depends on your use case. There are a few very cool use cases for native mode. I just had one yesterday where I had some Java-based command line tool. And then, the difference between the invocation was like, I was invoking this like 200 times on a big directory. And then, like invoke, you can watch it, versus you do the native build and then it's just done in half a second. So this is just really cool, for command line tooling or some sort of command or, any more special purpose type of thing like a Kubernetes operator or something. It's really cool to do this native.
Yeah.
And the other big advantage is, of course, scale to zero. If you have some sort of serverless environment, and not just serverless for the invocation, that's a different story, but really the scale to zero, that you say you have nothing running and you need a cold start and you need people wait for the first cold start request. That is then a different story, and then it really makes sense. For anything else, that really depends, because, well, we talked about throughput already, so this can be better in the JVM mode. Resource consumption also depends. You could kind of calculate really based on your needs. But the effort will definitely be less in the JVM mode. That's for sure. It will just work, especially with the libraries that you use, right? So if you use some sort of third-party library where you're not sure if it works in this mode, in the Quarkus JVM mode, it will definitely work. And it might work or might require some extra effort, like some, register for reflection and all of these things for the native mode. But usually it is somewhat possible. It just requires a little bit of effort.
Yeah. Max has some problems to connect, so he will rejoin. But until he comes, I think the other strong point of Quarkus that not many people realize that is that through the extensions and the build optimizations, it gets a very good idea of what you're trying to do. And with this knowledge, you can either optimize the app or do smart things when you are in dev mode, or apply heuristics like, I noticed you call this endpoint in a blocking fashion, but it's a non-blocking one, so maybe you're missing an annotation here. And I think we will see more of that as extension writers realize, the power behind this. So it kind of creates a new space, between the build, the runtime. Now we have this thing in between that can become smarter, as we discover, what the hell we can do with this. So, yeah, there's Max again. Works better now, Max? Yeah, it's a bit jumpy, I think, on your end. Sebastian, do you have like a wish list of things that you'd like to see in Quarkus, or anything you're missing or your clients are missing?
Actually, not much. And I was really thinking about this. There are some minor tweaks in the development mode that we can have a talk about. But first and foremost, I want to start with, we set this. It's basically pretty much the state of the art, as good as it gets, the development mode in Quarkus. So this works really well. Especially, and I've did some kind of workarounds, hacky things with the dev mode for non-Quarkus projects, especially with that. I would say Quarkus is now one of the fastest ways how to execute tests, like in general. So especially this continuous testing thing is very, very interesting. Okay, let me start from this point. So development experience in general, dev mode, yes, that's for sure. I think everybody knows about this. And I'm a big fan of the continuous testing mode, but not so much for the continuous part, but basically for the part how fast you can trigger it. That really mean from pressing your key to seeing the change, like, yes or no, or seeing the result. Because even in your IDE, and I challenge everybody to try this out. In your IDE, press Shift F10 or whatever your IDE is, and just count, and then you wait for the result, and then it kind of spins, and then you get the result, and it tells you, hey, this has been done in 10 milliseconds. Yes, but I waited 3 seconds to get to the result, right? And in the continuous testing, and correct me on this, but I think it's just because everything is compiled under the hood and it's just there, and you're just invoking that methods, and it runs basically, and you can press that key and then you get the result, which is just extremely cool. Yeah. And that is just a big one of the most important features or nicest features that I have. What I would like, one thing is, I know there are a few things that already work that are not perfectly documented yet. So I always have to tell people, hey, use this extra, flag to do the exclude pattern, include pattern, all of these things, that it can run all of your tests, or that you can choose which tests you want to run. And I also came across a few kind of like minor tweaks where you can further optimize this. For example, one thing would be customizable keystrokes. Did you say you could, for example, choose something like a test suite or a selection of tests that you would like to have? And then with that particular keystroke, you either kind of switch it, or you switch it and execute it already. It depends. Mm-hmm. So I actually provided I think an issue, and somebody provided pull request. That was it already, which needs to be merged for this. So this would be cool to have that. And then, of course, people could come up with their own sort of actions that they could have during development. It might be something like, reset database or something like that. I don't know how much that needed is it. So for example, you could think of things like, hey, I have a few different use cases, and based on that, I need different base data in my database. And why not just, connect to it and then execute this SQL script or that SQL script or something like that. This would be something interesting. The test suite perspective is still something that definitely could be improved. It maybe already include a lot of things that might not be documented, so I'm not sure about this. But basically, what works today is the pattern that you can say, okay, you can have an testing naming strategy, IT test or UI IT or however you want to call them, and include this. This sort of works. But it would be nicer to have more the inclusion of, mix and match of different suites of maybe tags that you can annotate your tests for. And I know this works in theory, but, this can be a little bit more smoother, the experience, that you literally just, have an annotation and or run this in this regard. Oh, and what I would like is to have this to work basically on a plain JUnit or plain unit test level. So not just for the Quarkus tests. So because I have a more unconventional opinion on the there, which is which is also something we can talk about. Max, did we just see you?
So.
No, we can hear you. It's kind of okay. It's much better than before.
Okay. Yeah.
There are some questions. Maybe we could try to take.
Yeah, I heard the thing about the testing. So this is actually one of the things that we actually are doing. We have a PR now, literally made this morning by Stuart, that instead of using the include, exclude, you can still do that, but you can use an expression. So you can use JUnit tags to say, hey, anything tagged with this and not these names, then all is okay. But I agree with you on having an easy way to run them. We should find a way to do that somehow. So yeah.
Yeah, I think basically if you say there are tags available, then you could already do this in the command mode, right? Like you're pressing colon and then just have something a test include pattern tags or something like this, if I remember. Yes, and then the PR I was mentioning about would include this plus for a keyboard shortcut. So then you could assign this to a shortcut and say, okay, 1, 2, 3, and just switch which kind of suite or setup you want, and then rerun the tests, and then being this setup.
Those two combined could be the power user option of that stuff. Yeah, I did. When I got cut off for whatever reason, there's a question about the Datadog. I just wanted to highlight for this one specific one that what you guys were talking about was native versus JVM mode, that you don't have to support all stuff in native. It's just fine in Java, or at least will give you a big boost. But for Datadog, this is a repeated question. So there's two issues. You can do it. So the thing is that people think they have to configure log4j, but they have to give the Datadog look for a specific pattern in the output. So you just need to configure the logging manager of Quarkus. But in addition to that, we actually have a setup now that you can configure log4j. The normal what's called a config option in log4j will work. And I think we just need to get it documented. So I'm recognizing there is a documentation issue here, but technically the specific thing with Datadog should actually work. But we should just get it documented because it's coming back a few times. Yeah. Okay. Did you cover the Kotlin one?
No,
I don't do Kotlin. I cannot comment on this.
Yeah. So again, the latest update I have there is that we support the latest version of Kotlin that allows us to run on both. There's like a limit. They added something in the latest version of Kotlin that makes it hard for the compile the toolchain to run. So we chose to not support the latest one until they fix that problem. But if there's some other specific one, it'd be good to know. But we do try and support the latest that is like technical feasible with all the different combinations. And then Thomas has a question here. So
point of view of the LS release, that's especially the one I read this it's about commercial support and the long-term support from Red Hat, right?
Well, in the mix. Yes, so Red Hat has since version 1 something had what we call a Red Hat Builder Quarkus, where we have the Red Hat commercially supported Quarkus product. And we had, so the version we had was like 1.11, some other number, 2.13 and 2.7 and 2.13. Because we didn't enterprise customers don't want to change every month. So we had those. What we didn't have was a community version of that LTS. Though in practice we had, because the code was there, you could build it if you wanted to. But what Thomas is referring to is that we've discussed and announced that for 3.2, we will plan to do an LTS release. So the ones that will become the Red Hat Builder Quarkus will also be marked as community release, long-term releases. So the idea there is that anyone who is depending on something on Quarkus and they don't want to update every month, what they should target is the LTS versions. So I think OpenDDK has a similar model, Spring and other libraries has similar setups. So that's the idea.
Yeah, my view on that is very positive. Especially, I would say for the regular developer or most projects, not much would change because, use it or don't use it, like whatever. But for those companies for whom it's basically a checkbox is to say, okay, what is the LTS strategy? Support as well, all of these questions. It's usually not actually a problem or actually a deal, but it's more like a checkbox, like, hey, by the way, is this available or is this supported? There you go, things like that. Although I had it in some projects where this was really not a big issue, but an issue that you say Quarkus advances really fast. So it's nice to be on one train where this is just a little bit more stable, and then you can say. Maybe move from LTS to LTS or something like this, and yeah, I like it. It's nice that this is an option.
May I ask, what will be the proper period for you? Like how long an LTS will be supported for?
Well, I mean, if really have no big ideas about that, just out of the box, maybe something similar to the JDK. I think this is a sensible time frame or sensible anchor. I would say, at least like more than half a year is definitely something.
Yeah. I think we're shooting for a year now, right?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Maximum.
We had a question. So there's one more. Milad is putting some stuff about the Kotlin, and that is I think that's the issue I referred to. But if he has a specific use case with a certain version of Kotlin, open an issue and we will take a look on it. And then we had the continuous testing, which was I think it was a good question.
Yes.
Paul,
I can answer this for myself. I always rerun all the tests, especially I care that my tests run really fast. And for this, and I said this before, this is a controversial opinion, but I mostly don't use Quarkus tests or code level integration tests. I mostly use either code level tests that use plain JUnit only, nothing else, or system integration tests that connect to your running application, but that are also powered by just plain JUnit. Which then, well, that's a longer topic, so we can talk about this if somebody's interested. But basically to say, separate your life cycle from just the test to the test environment. So don't, tangle these up. And then your tests run extremely fast. And so I rerun all the tests, and usually they run in, just a few hundred milliseconds at most. So then you just,
So if you run all your tests, why do you even need a pattern saying only run these tests?
Yes. So for what we talked about before, that's more the special case if you say and this happens if the use case actually takes longer. So not because of the test technology, but if you say, okay, I create an order, then I have to wait 5 seconds until it's processed, then it's sent here, and then it's sent there. And sometimes we have that this takes longer. Or UI tests are also usually not that super fast. If you include Selenium, Selenide, they're quicker than you could click, of course, but it's still like a few seconds, or it adds up. So you do want to exclude them. But I mean, because the question, I just said this, what I commented, because the question said only reruns tests that impacted change code. So I don't say don't run the failed tests or rely on the continuous testing. But what I usually do, I switch the window and press R for rerun all of the tests of the current pattern, and that just reruns all of them regardless of whether they failed or not, or what was changed or not. So that's my comment on
right, and that's the and to answer Paul is like you can imagine that we have the continuous testing that does this detection, but if it actually detects, this requires you to run these 15 tests, and let's say 3 of those are very slow, you don't want to run those. So therefore you say, hey, run all the stuff you've seen, but exclude the slow ones. That's the use case, right? And that's the power of this. That by default we will have a good approximation, but sometimes you're like, I don't trust the system. Let me just run this stuff, or I know a specific use case I want to test, and I don't want to wait for the slow ones.
Yes.
So it's just to be able to cover the whole spectrum of all the different scenarios.
And this would be extremely good, what we talked about before, that you say then you can switch these patterns by simple keystroke. So you say, just always run all of the tests except the slow ones, and then you can just quickly rerun them. And then I say, let me grab a coffee. So I switch to the, everything pattern, and I rerun everything, including the slow domain tests and UI tests, while I grab my coffee. So
it was funny. Like literally this morning, I was looking at this. I was like, hey, what are the things we actually haven't done? Yeah.
Awesome.
And and the you tell me the shortcut thing about having a shortcut for dev mode command. Those two combined could be very powerful. We definitely I'll look to see if we can get it in. Just,
maybe there were rumors that I'm going to be at the show today, so they're like, hey, Sebastian's coming up, let's implement this feature, we need something to
Sebastian, you talk more about the way you do testing and stuff. I keep thinking that Quarkus is probably a great environment to get new developers started. Even, I don't know, students that learn Java, right? Since everything works out of the box. Did you have this type of experience with customers, like junior teams starting with Quarkus, or is it like more seasoned ones?
Actually, both. I mean, the more senior ones probably appreciate it even more because they've lived through this world of slow application servers and waiting half an hour for the deployment and things like that. But I've also had this a few times that they were like really younger, and I mean not just young in terms of years of service, but young by age developers, where they say, they want to do enterprise stuff, and it doesn't have to be just JavaScript or Laravel or whatever have you, but you can use a Java-based solution. And pretty much all of them were really delighted how well this works, especially with the development experience, but then also having a fully fledged type-safe language like Java, which is still always, the only problem with this is you see this only in the long or mid-term when you have a decent project, right? I mean, all the enterprises understand this, that Java is the way to go, basically, or a type-safe language, a properly compiled language is the way to go. If you do a hello world application, then you could do PHP or JavaScript or whatever. You just see it in the long term. So that's sometimes the problem for starting out. You're like, it's the other way is faster. Yes, now, but you will then, what happens if this stuff gets more complex? But for people with Java background or knowledge who try it out, and pretty much what I see as a reaction, they're just pretty delighted how well this works, especially the development mode, or how quickly you can prototype and develop something.
Yeah, I was hoping like Quarkus will help bring new people to Java, like those that would say, Java is now COBOL or something.
For enterprise, I would say it does, yes. For the language itself, I mean, that's always the question, in which area you would like to go as a developer, right? Like if you're interested in web development or, other stuff, I mean, it's still what we do is a more like kind of like boring business type of things. But for enterprise, definitely, yes. Definitely.
So, anything else on your wish list?
On my wish list, actually not really. Like for this integration, this works really well. The only thing, like don't overdo it with feature inclusion. So is to say, like what we talked about before, but the core features are really, as they are. This works really well. I would also say probably from the development pace, it gets a little bit more stable and slower. So this was sometimes a thing that, as we talked about before, it would really, Quarkus would really advance a lot and fast. So that then, this is something in projects to keep up with. But I think also then with Quarkus 3, LTS, and things like that, this works quite well. One thing that sometimes people struggle with is security. Although I have to say, I mean, I've been living this a long time. I still have to say, from my experience, Quarkus is probably the easiest and best way to do security in enterprise Java, because security is always awful. I mean, it's not fun. It's a mess to integrate. It's bad to test and whatnot. Basically the state of the art is obviously OpenID Connect, and to include that is, I mean, what is the best way to put this? It's kind of interesting when you want to include this really for a complex enterprise project. They usually, once it gets above, the hello world and the kind of like, oh, we don't care, like as long as it somehow works. What I see a lot is either people using something like Keycloak, where they say we have one solution that then does the authentication with maybe multiple authentication providers, like your social login, Google login, all of these things. But then you have to control within your Keycloak. Or you actually say, I want to have the multiple control inside my application, but then usually you want to customize it more. So this is then usually an issue. This is not really Quarkus' fault, of course, because if you say, hey, my different providers give me different session times or different configurations or whatnot, so of course, that's not really something that Quarkus could change easily. But then actually what happens in projects quite often is that you have to implement your own custom, HTTP authentication mechanisms and all of these usual suspects of types, where then you say, okay, I do own custom stuff based on whatever. But I couldn't even tell you what my wish list is there. I don't know, because all of it works. I mean, you can do your own stuff, and it's sort of, it's even documented, sort of. Sometimes we had to like debug our way through in order to comprehend what is going on there. At least this works. So thanks to the development, it's possible. But yeah, I don't know. It's like just probably security seems to be a thing. Maybe some more documentation, but that's not something I could point to. I just know that it is an issue.
I can comment on it. So on the security one, it's been a discussion for a long time. So we actually, in the last, I'll say for Quarkus 3, and we focus on getting the documentation better. But in doing so, the documentation has improved. We also found out there's some defaults and stuff we might improve a bit. And especially around this, I think, again, because Quarkus has been used, it's been evolving. What you had in Quarkus 2 the early days has greatly improved in the later days of Quarkus 2, and getting that documented and getting a bit more accessible is definitely on our list. One of the things that was a big issue was like the whole OpenID, like the 27, like it's all OpenID, the standard, but everyone does the standard a little different. That is now documented for all the like Twitter, GitHub, Google, etc. So definitely an area we have improved and definitely are improving. And another thing you said about like don't have the core blown up, which is something we're very cautious about. And also one reason why we in Quarkus 3 we added this for the CLI, we now have plugins so that the CLI doesn't keep growing forever. And similar, I'm trying to find ways to, because we can do a lot of stuff in dev mode. So having one of the things is that every extension can add stuff to the dev UI, but they all assume that the extension is providing something at runtime. But there are things you only want to do during tests. But if you add it, it gets included into runtime.
Oh yeah.
And that's so that's a bit of a thing. So we are looking at finding a way to, hey, when you add an extension, that extension, let's say, for example, the packed extension is only used during tests. And today, if you use the tooling, it gets added to the runtime when it should be added just to the test. And then there's like hooks in the dev UI that might not be documented, or let's say have a public API. I want to make sure we can try and do more of that, exactly because so we can keep the core light and not bloating.
Yeah, there's one more thing that I think about on my wish list, which is not really a feature wish list. It's more like a nice to have of a would be cool thing. That is some more background information of basically what Quarkus does internally, both at this build time, but then also what is being generated, even if it's just for an examples or for just for the understanding. So what I did, or the best thing that I found, I was really like, okay, how does this work? Or kind of like for me to comprehend all of the steps that happen at the, from your Java code at this build time optimization to then your running Java code. How does this sort of look like? I mean, you could have a look at the, bytecode and all of it. But what I did was to build my own extension just for the fun of it. And, people can see like my latest video or one of the latest videos there. But what it does, it teaches quite well how, this the build time and these build items versus runtime thing works. But it would be super cool to have some more, even just general documentation and kind of like an FYI thing, because this is not something that, developers just use it, and it works. And I've been using it for years now, kind of like without knowing what happens under the hood. But sort of how this would work. And this is a little bit similar to in the EE days, what one could do if you say, hey, if you really want to know how EE works or how to, use CDI, then go implement your own implementation, like go implement the spec yourself or something like that. And then you will see sort of, what are the issues here? What is kind of like being generated? What is the code? So this will be super interesting. Just even can be a couple of diagrams, can be, sort of this connection or a very basic hello world and with examples and some bytecode or something like that. This would be super cool, just even for understanding and even for.
Sounds like you already have the material. You can open a PR for it.
Some material, but not really the understanding behind it. I mean, really, this is like.
I'm half joking and half serious. So I wish Holly was here, because that's one of the Holly had for a long time that, or not a long, for a long time. See, one of the things that can we come back to again and again is like, oh, it'd be nice to actually have like, here's the 10 things you should do, so you can and could do in an extension, and here's how it works. So definitely on the same point. So if you have so many ideas there, like it'll be great to. I haven't seen your demo video about this.
So these are, yes, in my video, I touched on a few points that are just kind of cool. So if you want to have your own bean, like with the injection available, if you want to have a custom configuration and things like that. So this is definitely helpful. This would be one thing, but even the other thing, just to understand of Quarkus in general. I mean, the extension helps you in a way that you're forced to be sort of in this life cycle, and then you kind of read about it. But I mean, even just with a plain Quarkus application is like, if you say, take the simplest Quarkus Hello World app and, explain me what is going on, what happens when I compile it, when I build it, and then when I run it, like, with the Java code or bytecode example, something like that.
And then we'll have
I think we have
extensions coming in.
Yeah, that's the problem. So you see, Brent Burnsmith is asking about the exporter for OTel. I thought it was there already. If not, then and Holly's here. Yes. Bernd, I don't actually know off the top of my head, so best to ask that on Slip. There, and then Holly says hi, so that's good. Now she knows there's others than her and me that wants it, so that's good. And then Adu says, when will Quarkus support starting Java 21? Yesterday. well, it does it today. I mean,
Yeah.
you can use Quarkus with Java 21. I did it just last week with. I was making a one page with JBang and Quarkus. I made an OpenAI plugin, and I was using Java 21 and the template stuff. Whoops. My phone is going crazy. So you can use Java 21 today. For if it's for native, then that should work too with a Graal VM I use in Java 21. But if there's any Java 21 that doesn't work, open an issue, we'll consider that a bug. So yeah.
So just to recap, I think what Sebastian said, keep the Quarkus core clean and small and lean, right? A bit more emphasis on testing, maybe a couple of things here and there, and expand through extensions, right? That's the message, correct, Sebastian? Yeah.
Yes. And keep Quarkus cool, and then it's No, really, I'm not very happy what we have.
Awesome, cool. And we're hitting the top of the hour, I think. I can find a clock somewhere. And then, Jan's saying, ask about 21. Is 21 being picked by Dip by default? No, the default is 17. And Java 21 is not out yet, so we don't. So by support meaning as does Red Hat support it? No, not yet. But does Quarkus work with 21 if you use it? Yes, it should. And if you see issues with it, open issue. That's definitely want to know. And I'm not sure if you already do it, but when Quarkus 2.13, I think we added a thing there. We will pick the latest long-term supported version with you, or whatever. If you run with 21, it should be 21. But I'm not sure if that's actually there yet because 21 is not released yet. So yeah, cool.
Awesome.
Can you guys still hear me? My phone is being weird.
Yeah. Yes, Max.
Okay. Cool. Awesome. Anyway,
no, I think this was a very nice.
Thank you, Sebastian, for joining. Have a great day. And next week it's a break because of holidays, but then we'll be back in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Awesome.